Instagram. And if anyone is watching, you'll just be seeing my face for the next 5 minutes. I'm Courtney from Stateless, and I will be right with you. Okay, we're just waiting. I see people are joining. Good to see you. We're just going to give us a couple minutes here for everybody to join. So I'll just be kind of awkwardly sitting here in front of this camera until you guys, everybody joins at 3. So we've got 5 minutes. I don't know if you want to sit here for 5 minutes with me. Okay, I see there's 11 people joined, so nice to see you guys out there on the internet. I'm just going to give us some time for others to join. My name is Courtney. I'll be right with you. Hi, I'll be right with you. I'm just letting people join. Thanks so much. Okay, I'm going to pin that. I'm going to pin that comment. Okay, great. Just a couple more minutes. Good to see everybody. So glad to be back here. It's been a while. Just a few more minutes. Thank you. Okay. Just a few more minutes. Thanks, everybody. I know it's awkward. I just want to give everybody a chance, and it always takes me a second to like pin the information at the bottom and to get everything set up. So thanks for your patience. I will be starting in 1 minute. Okay. All right, I'll get going. I'm Courtney, for those of you who haven't met me yet here on these lives. I'm a product developer and production manager working with Stateless here in New York. Stateless is an outsourced design and development and production team working with brands both big and small all over the world. We help you make your product, and we can insert ourselves in whatever part of the process that you need. We have a partnership with Makers Row and now Embark Live. For those unfamiliar, Embark Live is a platform connecting fashion entrepreneurs with business professionals. Makers Row is a resource to get your products made, and then Embark Live is a place to go to be connected with professionals who can help you with all other aspects of your business. You can find Stateless on Makers Row and members of our team on Embark Live. So today we're going to talk about fabric strategy. I've done several lives at this point, and it's been a while, but it's good to be back. But I wanted to talk specifically about fabric strategy. We did talk in the past about sourcing, so there will be some overlap, but this is a little different. Feel free to ask questions throughout. I will also, if I don't answer while I'm talking, I will stop at the end of each segment to make sure to address your questions. I'm toggling here. I'm on YouTube and Facebook and also here on Instagram. So I've got several different platforms going on, so bear with me. Okay, there are a few options with sourcing materials, and the main three that I want to talk about, there's four, but the main three I want to talk about are stock service. Stock service, this is what a majority of brands do, even large companies. Stock service fabrics are milled en masse at either the mill itself keeps the stock rolling, or a converter is what we call them, purchases a large lot of the fabric and they keep it in stock and they sell off the fabrics a roll at a time to small and mid-sized brands. These fabrics are usually, because they're in stock, they have tiered pricing. So sample yardage is going to be the most expensive with a surcharge. Then there's a full roll price, which is your starting wholesale price. And then from there, the price per yard goes down when you start to increase your quantities, depending on who you work with. It could be at 300 yards, it could be at 500 yards, another 1,000 yards. Sometimes they do it by every 3 rolls. A roll of fabric is anywhere between 50 and 100 yards. So it just depends on which actual fabric you're using, whether or not you can determine how many yards are on a roll. So working with stock service, the main thing you want to recall is that stock is constantly fluctuating. So as soon as you know how many units you're going to produce, it's really important to do the math to determine how many yards you need. So we've sampled, let's just talk about this shirt. We sampled this shirt, we've got this lace here, we've got this poplin here. I now know I want to make 50 units. I've got my pricing from the factory. I'm going to reach out. This is stock, this is stock. I'm going to reach out to both of these vendors and I'm going to ask them for their stock positions. Let's say, I'm just going to make it up, this takes a quarter yard and this takes a full yard. So I'm going to reach out to the vendors and I'm going to say, hey, I need a full roll of this white poplin and I'm going to need, 25 yards or whatever of this lace. And even though we're not ready to go into production, we want to check as soon as we know how much yardage we need, we want to check on stock positions because stock is always fluctuating. Now, if the fabric is a stock running program, even if it's sold out, it might be on a ship, like clearing customs as we speak, or it's definitely on order. The mills and people who do produce stock programs, unless it's a canceled quality, if they're out, they're already ordering. Now, sometimes it could be that they had just ordered, I don't know, let's say 10,000 yards of this poplin, and 3 brands came in and bought it up right away, and so they don't have anything coming for 6 to 8 weeks. That's why you want to reach out as soon as you know about the fabrics and how much you need to see the stock positions, because you can then place your order on back order, for example, and you'll basically allocate some of the yardage that is on that boat already or at the mill getting made. They'll reserve some of that for you. This year obviously has been wild with COVID and everything. And there were a lot of fabrics, like a fabric like this, the main body fabric on my shirt, twills, even canvases were being used. Normally we have a lot of vendors we work with who keep stock, and a lot of those fabrics were completely sold out except for in wild colors like bubblegum pink because of PPE. So we had to pause when the factories all closed, and then as soon as everybody was back to reopening, we reached out to get the materials on this one project, and it was all sold out because of PPE. And in this case, this year it was a little odd because, the mills also had to close, so they were backed up. So that was a really unusual situation. Normally, you're able to front load all of this by saying, okay, we're on second fit sample. I know for sure I want to make 50 of these. I've got all my prices ready. We're still going to do our salesman samples and our PP samples, but I want to make sure that I start getting my fabrics. Now, so far, I'm sorry if you guys on YouTube, my computer the fan is running, so sorry if it's a little noisy. But anyway, so far I'm talking about e-commerce based businesses, and that's because I'm really tailoring this conversation to you guys here on Makers Row. Most of you are going to be working in stock programs regardless until you, even when you're making 300 units per style, per color, you're still going to want to work with stock. And most of you are, mostly producing e-com. When you have wholesale, it's a little more complicated because you have to wait until your sales close to know how many you're going to order. But you do have a way more strict deadline. If you want to talk about deadlines, have a look at a conversation I had about the difference between setting up your business for e-commerce and wholesale. You can find an archived live on Makers Row's Facebook. But anyway, if you are in wholesale, you have a slightly different model. You have to finish your samples in time for market, and then you go and show your samples, and then you sell for a couple months, or usually at least a month. And then you close your sales, and then you allocate all of your product, and then you usually have like 3 months to produce it. So again, stock fabrics, they're in stock. So even if it was sold out, we only have 6 weeks that we have to wait to get that fabric. Whereas if you are going to do the next thing that I'm talking about, which is made to order fabrics, it's a little tricky with wholesale. I'll get to that more in a minute. I just want to make sure that no one is asking any questions. Okay, we've got no questions over there. And so far, I just want to make sure. Okay, great. No questions. Cool. So, okay, I just want to, before I move on to the next type of fabric that you can work with, I just want to reiterate how important it is to make sure that you check on your stock positions. Make sure. Nowadays we have e-commerce as well. So let's say, I don't know, we're still in wholesale, let's say, and you've got this shirt. I'm going to just keep using the shirt. This shirt is selling okay. We've got 25 units on order. I'm probably going to need to at least make 50 units with my factory. And so I might just order enough fabric for 50 units because it's selling a little slow. I'll sell the rest on my e-com, and that's that. If we see that something's selling really well, it's especially important. Maybe you write the vendor and you say, hey, I'm going to need at least 1,000 yards now, but I may need more. What do you have on hand? You can at least reserve that 1,000 so that you can, produce what you need without having to wait that 6 weeks. Now, if you have to wait for your fabrics and you want to start producing with one lot and then you produce with another, you do have costs associated with that. You're going to have 2 cutting fees and you're going to have 2 market fees. I'm not going to get into detail with what that means. You can go back and look at some of my previous lives, but basically, you just at least want to be able to get, especially when you're in a wholesale brand, you want to get, if there's wholesale people and then you can pay for your e-com later, go ahead. But you're saying, oh my gosh, this shirt is selling so well, I'm going to need at least 1,000 yards. I better write my vendor to make sure that they have fabric, or at least I'm booking some. So I'm going to jump forward. I actually have a little prompt that I already prepped here, but I'm going to jump forward because this makes a good segue into something I'm going to talk about later, which is leveraging. Let's say that I leverage this fabric, which means that I use it across several styles. Let's say that I'm in my 3rd year of being a brand. I've used this every single season. I feel confident that even if, let's say, oh my gosh, this thing is selling so well, I need at least 1,000 yards. Why don't we just buy 1,500? Because I'm going to use this again next season for a different style. I'm going to use this again on the other shirt that's selling slower. There's only 25 units on order there, but let's just do 1,500 yards, excuse me. Or maybe you go up to 2,000 and then you just have the fabric on hand. You get a lower price because you bought a higher quantity, and it's a fabric that you know that you're going to use. So this is a really strong argument for leveraging fabrics. I'll get into that later, but I just wanted to jump forward and mention that. Okay, so the other 2 main options, we're not going to go into major detail here about it because I am catering this conversation to you guys through Makers Row, and most of us are all in the same boat. We're not making hundreds of thousands of units here. So there are made-to-order fabrics, and if you ever go to a fabric show when we can, you got to make sure that you're asking, if they don't carry stock, don't work with them. You can't. You need to work 1.5 years in advance to work with made-to-order fabrics or more. Because made-to-order fabrics, basically you get either like a color card. If you've seen them, it's on a card and it's a piece of fabric mounted to the card. They might not even have additional colors that they've developed. They just develop one fabric. Or it could be like on a hanger with a large piece of fabric hanging off of it. in made to order fabrics, you can usually select your own color. You can't like make tweaks to the fabric. The fabric has already been developed, but you say, okay, I've got these special colors. I've got this neon green, I've got this violet, and I've got this yellow. And, you want it to be super custom. And so you're going to use this made to order fabric. You're going to need 6 weeks to develop your lab dips, which are your custom colors. You may have to redip, especially on hard colors like purples, things that can pull weird. Sometimes even creams can be a little yellow or a little green. So you want to give yourself 6 weeks there at least, or maybe even 12, because you might have to redip. Then when it comes to ordering sample yardage, you have to mill it. They're going to make it. And you have to usually order at least, usually they make you order more than one roll. So usually you need to order at least 100 yards, sometimes 300. And that takes another 6 weeks. And then when it comes to production, you have to mill their large order quantity, which is usually at least 550 yards. So needless to say, it's pretty crazy to work with made to order fabrics. There's ways for you to work with stock fabrics and still customize your fabrics. And you can, like I was saying, this poplin, for example, you can dye it. You can garment dye. You can panel dye. You could screen print on it. You could try to do a digital print on it. You could do things to customize it working with stock fabrics. So I really wouldn't recommend working with made-to-order fabrics for anybody that is in this conversation. I've always worked with small to mid-sized brands my whole career. They've gotten big after, but my specialty is in startups. I love it. And even with like mid-sized brands where we were making 300 units per style per color, we didn't really have the luxury of time to mill to order. We just didn't. We still usually worked with stock fabrics. And what you can do with a lot of stock fabric vendors is with a certain MOQ, you can custom dye at least like 1 or 2 colors. So let's say you have like a special red for your brand that is not present on that color card. You can sample in the black or whatever other color you're going to do. You can lab dip at the same time that you're doing your normal development, and you can just mill that one custom color in your normal lead time without having to start 1.5 years in advance. Most of the time, you want to start at least 1 year in advance with stock program. If you're working with made to order, it's at least 1.5 years, 2 years in advance. The other option is custom development. I've only done this a couple times in my life. You usually need like a textile technician on your team to do this. This is not really something that any of us are ever really going to do. It's not relevant. You're basically working like you take a yarn and you're like, I want to make a PK, and it's all an experiment, and it might torque. It's like twisting in the machine. It's going to shrink weird. So you can't really have a deadline with custom milling because you're basically doing trial and error. Sorry about the sirens. We're here in New York. But there is one more option that I do want to talk about, which is working with dead stock. We at Stateless hear this a lot more as the years go on. It makes sense that it's becoming more popular with the growing concerns to protect the environment. Totally get it. Super amazing. But I just want to talk about the major limitations in working with dead stock that you need to be aware of. This is actually something that a brand we work with, he brought up to us. I was talking with him, and I was like, oh, I'm doing these Makers Row. And he was like, oh, you should talk about dead stock. So basically how dead stock works is, let's say, I don't know, Marc Jacobs makes this fabric, and they have, you always have to order a buffer after production. So here in New York, you can go into Mood and you can find Marc Jacobs. I have this Marc Jacobs coat, and then my friend texted me a picture of the Marc Jacobs fabric that was my coat. And I was like, oh, should I buy it and make like a whole, should I make a suit? But anyway, what they do is, you buy a buffer in production, and whatever's left over, these bigger companies will sell them off to jobbers. And it's really cool because it avoids, wastage. It helps close the loop. And, you're basically upcycling things that would have normally either been like pulverized and turned into like insulation or gone into the landfill. So it's a cool practice, but why it's hard for us at Stateless, and why it's hard for brands who want to continue and not, you're not just doing this as a hobby or doing this for funsies, is that, basically most brands we work with, new designers and or new creative directors who don't have a lot of experience, they have a hard time looking at a swatch of fabric and then imagining what it's going to be like in a full garment. To the untrained eye, this fabric even, it's like, it's thin, it's kind of flimsy, it looks kind of like crappy. It's really inexpensive, but it makes a beautiful shirt. Unless you know how fabrics turn into garments, it's really hard to imagine what a product is going to look like from a swatch. It's the number one, I'd say, I mean, this is not a fact, this is just me thinking, but I'd say that one issues a lot of the brands we work with have is that they see their first sample and like, oh, that's not what I thought it would be. And it's nothing that we can kind of get into their heads to tell them about, because it's just literally, you need the experience of knowing what a fabric looks like small and then how it translates into a garment. So anyway, with dead stock, we have done it before in our past with a couple of brands who make specialty limited editions things, especially if you're working in New York where you can make like 25 units. Most of everywhere else in the US, you're going to need to make 50 units. So you're going to need at least 100 yards if you're making a jacket, for example, or pants. And you're going to need at least, 60 yards if you're making a shirt out of a dead stock fabric. This is straight sizing, and I'm going to say like women's yields, just so you know. This does not include plus sizing. But anyway, so when you find this dead stock fabric, basically in order to make sure that it's still there, like when my friend saw that Marc Jacobs fabric at Mood, down in the garment district, it's not like I could have been like, hey, buy me 2 yards, let me try to make a sample. And then I expect after I'm done with the sample 4 to 6 weeks later that fabric is still going to be there. I basically have to buy that entire roll. And in that case, that roll that he had, I think it was 50 yards. And I would have had to make, my samples. I would have probably consumed like 6 yards for samples, and then whatever was left, 42 or whatever, 44 yards, that would yield maybe 20, 21 jackets. And that's basically, you have to be comfortable looking at a fabric right then and buying it right then before you even make a sample when you work with dead stock. That's challenging for a lot of brands. So while it's a really cool idea, and it's definitely something that I personally, with my belief about how we need to protect this environment, I think it's a great thing. It's a great trend that's happening. But you just need to be careful, because you are upcycling if you actually make this thing. But if you go and start buying rolls of fabric and then you make a sample and you're like, yuck, I don't like it, and then it just sits there, you're just making more waste too. And you also lost money and wasted money yourself, which is, when you're a business owner, it's the most important thing that you need to be careful about. So I hope that helps answer a couple questions about why we hear a lot from brands like, oh, well, I know that there's probably more fabric companies than this. Yes, there are thousands of fabric companies, but you are starting with 25 to 50 to 100 pieces per style, per color. We need to work with these stock service vendors. There's only like 50 stock service vendors out there, and of them, so I'm making this up, but like 20% do active, 20% do things like lace and things like that. 20% do wovens, and some very few do like a combination of wovens, jerseys, and swim fabrics. Each of these groupings of vendors are only applicable to certain qualities of fabrics. So you are really limited when you first start off with your fabric options, but that doesn't mean that you're going to be making something that everybody else has. This is just a regular poplin. Another designer could take this same fabric and make a completely different shirt. I can take this same fabric and make several different styles. It's not a problem to be working with stock. It's not like, oh gosh, I'm using what everybody else is using. It's literally how it works when you first start. And it's a good challenge to work within those confines. And as you grow, then you can start to work into, made to order fabrics, but it's really not something you want to do until you're making 300, 500 pieces per style, per color. Okay, so I'm going to stop and see if there are any further questions. Where are we? Hi. I missed the first few minutes of today's talk. May have missed this. I want to have a custom art design applied to Lycra, spandex, or mesh fabrics. What should I consider? Great question. I have a little bit of that saved for the end, but I will jump to it now. So with stock fabrics, you have the option to customize. Let me just pull up I have a little cheat sheet. So let me just pull it up because I want to make sure that I'm thorough. So you can print fabrics, stock fabrics. You usually have to use a third-party vendor. There are a couple great vendors who supply the fabric and print on it. Love it. But that's usually limited to sublimation. Sublimation printing is only exclusive to 100% polyester or high poly content. It could have some spandex, like 6 to 8%. Sublimation is great. There's usually just a 1 roll minimum. It's pretty affordable. Let's say the fabric is normally $7 a yard. When you do, a full roll, it's going to make it like $12 a yard to print on it. If you do samples, it's going to be more like $14 a yard. But anyway, so you can take an all over print and you can sublimate it onto the fabric if it's polyester. Sublimation, the full name for sublimation is called dye sub or dye sublimation because it's printed on paper and then it's like pressed onto the fabric and it's pushed through a heating like roller, and it essentially transfers, it slightly dyes the surface of the fabric with color. You can get really amazing crisp photoreal prints with sublimation, and you can do really good, brilliant color. The only thing is that the backside is white. So like when you see on swim, usually prints are just on the surface. So if you're doing something, especially for like activewear or across the bust or somewhere where there's like a lot of stretch or stress on the fabric, if it's too ill-fitting, if you are making it too tight and you have it sublimated, there's going to be white grin through, right? So you want to make sure that when you're working with sublimated fabrics, that the way you make your garment fit is flattering so that, because normally, let's say we were using a regular solid swim fabric across, if there's stress marks going across the bust on a solid fabric, it kind of looks okay. It kind of, it's like, oh, it's a little tight on her chest, but it's not like, oh, what's wrong with that top? But when it's tight and you've dye subbed, there's white grin through. So now it looks like the print is like, has white coming through and it looks bad. So you need to make sure when you're working with sublimation that you have that fabric in mind when you're addressing your fit of your product. The next option is a digital print. Digital printing you could do on this fabric. It comes out a little chalky. It's even more so on the surface of the fabric than a dye sub, but you can do it on cotton, you can do it on silk, you can do it on rayon, you can do it on knits, and you can do it on wovens. This is a woven. Knit is like a jersey for a t-shirt or like sweatpants, terry, things like that. You can achieve pretty good color with regular digital printing, but if you imagine like those printers, like this is your paper and there's like those printer heads and it like goes like this across the paper and it puts color, that's what digital printing is. That's what digital printing is, even on a garment. So right now what I'm talking about is repeat prints. These are prints that, go all over from seam to seam and repeat through the yardage. So you can do that with either sublimation or digital. Another way, of course, is silk screening. You can do large scale silk screen to do kind of an all over print on a large panel, or you can do like a graphic. Like let's say, I don't know, we wanted to print this instead of making it lace and it was all solid. Like you could print a flower up here, on a pre-cut panel of the shirt, and you could customize your fabric, or at least, trick it out with your brand eye, through silk screen printing. You can also just do like graphics, like your brand name across, or like some kind of character or something like that, and that differentiates your product, even though you're using stock fabrics and what have you. That differentiates your product from others. These are the three options for smaller to mid-sized brands. There are several other options for printing that have huge minimums that I'm not even going to bother talking about. I've talked about it in the past. If you guys want to go through all of my Maker's Rows, I don't remember which one anymore. It's been so many, but I did talk about the other printing options. But these are really great for, anything less than 300 units per style per color. Now, going back to where I was about to go, leveraging fabrics. Let's say, again, this poplin, I'm in my third year of my brand. I've been using this poplin. I did a button-up shirt with it. I did a dress with it. Now I've got this frilly top. And I know I'm just buying this fabric. I'm just keeping, I always have like 300 yards on hand. I can take this fabric, and even though, and I'm buying it now at 300 yards at least, so I'm getting a good price on it. I can take, one roll and get it digitally printed and use that 50 yards for just a special colorway. And that'll give you, let's say in shirts, you got 50 shirts, or if you do it in a dress, it's going to be 25 dresses, in this special colorway. So you can use these fabrics. You're leveraging fabrics. The same exact fabrics can appear very different depending on what you do with them. I'm just going to double check more questions. For swim fabrics, which method do you recommend best for swim fabrics? Definitely sublimation. Now, there is one more option to print on nylon, but it has really high minimums. Nylon, I think it's 300 yards. So if you do have like Carvico, beautiful Italian fabrics, beautiful. Oh. Some of them are nylon. Usually with athletic fabrics and fabrics are either nylon spandex or poly spandex. Most of the time you work with nylon when it's solids or pre-print. And then when you want to do your own custom, I would recommend working with polyester. The nylon printing is beautiful, color rich, so amazing. It's still only on the surface, but you have a higher minimum. So I wouldn't recommend it until you're really, especially with swim, your yield is so small. You need like a quarter of a yard for, a bikini, unless you're doing plus size. But, you don't want to start getting into nylon printing until you have the units to back it. Or if you're doing like a signature print for your brand, across the entire collection, you've got an 8-piece collection, okay, for it. You can use nylon printing. Otherwise, I would just recommend sublimation. Okay, I'm going to look through some questions here too on Instagram. Oh, it is so awkward to do both. Sorry, everybody down here, you're seeing up my face. Sorry about it. So stock fabric is only available for a few months. No. Stock fabric, if the quality is in stock, the vendors, obviously they want to keep it in stock, but sometimes people buy it. So it's constantly fluctuating. And as long as it's not a canceled style, so that's another reason that you want to double check, because there is, like, for example, we're working at Stateless on something right now where we're going to order enough fabric that it doesn't matter, but they're no longer going to carry this fabric after we're done ordering it. They have some stock, so we're buying the black, and then we custom dyed one color, and we have to buy the full 550 yards in order to get that quality. And in the future, if we want to make more in that exact fabric, we have to buy a 150 yards. But if that fabric had been in stock, we could just call or write with an email and say, hey, I need 100 yards. And as long as they have the stock, they'll send it to us. If they don't have it in stock, they're usually, like I said, it's usually still on a boat, or it's almost there by the time you're going to have a 6-week minimum between when you ask for the stock product and it's been sold out and to where you get it again, except for when we had COVID and it was crazy. Okay, let's see other questions. Keep going. Where in New York can we get 25 units made? Honestly, a lot of factories will do it. They just charge you an arm and a leg. And New York is the only place that we can get. I mean, it's already expensive as it is, just because of how expensive rent is here and life. But if you give a factory, if you go with one style and you want to make 25 units, they're gonna kick you out. But if you have a collection and you only want to make 25 units, they will definitely do it. But it's going to be like 3 times more than it would be anywhere else made in the US. I would say, for a rule of thumb, everybody always asks this, no one has yet, but you want to start with 50 units minimum. 100 units is a good size per style, per color, a good size order. But not everybody has the ability that's still considered a small brand. Like for factories, if you're making less than 300 pieces per style, per color, it's a small order. So 100 pieces per style, per color on a 14-piece collection is a lot of product to sell for some, not for others. 25 pieces would go too fast for some, but so you don't really, with a super high-end product that's expensive and can be made in New York, you could just do 25 of this beautiful leather jacket, and then it sells out and you have a good problem. You've sold out. Okay. Is it possible to buy most fabrics already pre-shrunk? That way you can prevent unnecessary customer returns. Great question. There's a couple options with shrinkage. There are several vendors that do pre-shrunk goods. I will say that it still usually shrinks up to 2%. That's like tolerance. if you're concerned, like a lot of the Japanese fabrics we work with, Japanese mills are really amazing and they do a lot of stock programs. They just have this respect for slow fashion and smaller batch. So a lot of the Japanese fabrics are not pre-shrunk. And what we do is we send it out for washing beforehand. And sometimes that means you have to cut it like the length of a cutting table, which is, I don't know, 10 feet long, maybe more, I don't know. The factory does it. We cut large panels and then it gets sent to wash, and it gets washed in hot water and then dried on high heat to shrink it out. And then that way your customer, you've pre-shrunk it. So even if the fabric isn't pre-shrunk, you can pre-shrink it. It adds about $1.50 to $1.75 to your each garment if you're making 50 pieces. Question, do you know what causes torquing fabric? I found a nice fabric in sample size, but it had a torque issue. Oh yes, I have so much experience with torquing. So some fabrics should not be washed in a machine. So torquing is when, let's say that this is like a rectangle cut of fabric. Torquing is when it goes like this after it's been washed. Beautiful. In my past, like when I really started getting busy in product development and production, I was living in Los Angeles, and back then, everybody wanted this like tissue thin knit jersey. It was beautiful, but you wash it and it torqued. So, and normally when you make a tank top out of t-shirt fabric, or, a cute like dress out of flowy dress out of t-shirt fabric, the customer expects to be able to wash it in the washer. But just some fabrics cannot be washed in the machine, so it causes torquing. Now, most suppliers work on eliminating torquing, but a lot of times you can just put dry clean only on a product, and even on the fabric that's being sold to you, the mill will say, this is a beautiful fabric. We developed it, and no one's telling us that we need to have it machine washable, so we're going to put dry clean only on this because otherwise it'll torque. But in my past, one of the few times I did develop material, it was with a merino wool, and we wanted it to be washable. And we sat there developing this. It was like a base layer, kind of like, we used to wear thermals. Now we wear that base layer thing for when it's cold out. It was supposed to be a base layer, and it was a thin merino wool, and it torqued. And we wanted it to be able to be washed because we wanted guys, who are running or, wearing it under their winter coat and you sweat in it, you want to be able to throw it in the washing machine. And so it took us about 2.5 years to develop that fabric to avoid torquing. It was hard. Is it possible to initially order just a salesperson sample from a factory? Yes. There's development and there's production. You want to go. I always talk way too long. Sorry, I just realized 3:30. But there's development, there's production. You always start with development, and you don't want to just do salesman samples. You want to do your proto, second fit, and your PP sample, and then you go into your salesman samples. And then once everything's done, then you go into production. That's how factories work. Some places only do samples, but most factories, they do your samples almost as a favor because they don't really make money off samples, with the expectation that you're going to do production with them. Okay, more questions. Let's see. I'm looking for help with wedding dress factory only in the U.S. I do custom dresses, and I started a new collection that goes wholesale. Any recommendations? Wedding dresses, I don't know where you're located, but we've got a bunch of amazing factories in New York. There's also some in Los Angeles, and you can look on Makers Row to find yourself a couple factories to work with. I would recommend taking a style that you already love and have a pattern that's fit approved and just having them run a sample. Anytime we in the industry find a new factory that we want to work with and we haven't worked with them in the past, we send a pattern and an inexpensive style to do with them, and we pay for it to see that they can do a good job. That's what I would recommend to anybody who wants to do, you already are, kind of running and you want to work with a new factory. If you go from start to finish with development to production, the proof is in the pudding. You did your samples and it's been good, and you don't have to worry about it. If you're starting from scratch, with a new factory, it's not as scary. Okay. Are there many stock service silk vendors in the U.S.? Oh, heck yeah, there are. You can find them on Makers Row. There's a couple. It's a faux pas. I don't know if all of you guys have seen me before, but it's a faux pas. We're pretty tight-lipped about our vendors. No one gives those out for free, so I'm not going to tell you who those people are, but there are plenty of silk vendors with stock service in the U.S. What's your recommendation for small collection Hi, Rose. If you could elaborate on that question, what it means, what's for a small children's collection, I will be happy to answer that. What fabrics do you suggest for children's clothing, particularly infant 0 to 24 months? Also curious about patterns. I'm a startup. Okay, fabrics for children's clothing. You've got two options. You've got knits, which either is going to be a jersey, a rib, or some kind of like sweatshirt material like fleece or terry. And you've got wovens. You've got all kinds of wovens. You can do, with babies, you usually do like bodysuits and PJs and stuff like that. So you're going to really want to work in the knits family. And then as you get to, you know, if you want to make like a bubble or, you know, an elastic like play suit thing, two-piece, you can use a fabric like this, a woven. But I would start with rib and stretch jersey for 0 to 24 month babies. Patterns, I would really work with a factory that has experience with children's clothing. You can either get patterns made separate of your factory with a pattern maker and then take your materials to a sample maker, or you can find a factory that does children's wear and you can just work with them start to finish. And I would recommend using either stretch jersey or stretch rib. Okay, let's see. Okay, great. Awesome. I am going to keep going for just a minute because we never really did talk about leveraging fabrics in detail. I'm supposed to have been done at 20 minutes, but I'm going to keep going. Okay, so leveraging fabrics means that a fabric is shared across more than one style. This is helpful considering the tiered costing we discussed earlier with stock service. If you make one style at 50 units with one fabric, your cost per yard can be, say, I don't know, $8.75. But if you make two styles at 50 units each, you may get the price per yard of the same fabric for $8.50. And of course, you did enough, you know, if you like make enough to require 300 yards, your price goes even lower. This is important for brands who make, say, I don't know, 7 to 11 styles per collection. Let's take my shirt again. For example, the lace at the front is what makes the shirt, but the fabric on the body can also be used for a button-up. It can be used for a dress if we line it. It can be used for, like, I can think of like 6 different styles I can do with this fabric in the same collection. And, you know, it doesn't look boring like the whole collection is like, oh God, that one white poplin. Because like, look at what I put here. Like, you know, and the other dresses, you can do cool things to them. And the button up is just a button up and it's cute and it's oversized, boyfriend fit or whatever. So you can take that same fabric and use it across the board. And it's very wise to do so. And it's very wise to continue to design into certain fabrics. Denims, if you like denim, we have a brand we work with. We use the same Japanese denim for their product. You can wash denim down to make it different. You can do different designs to get the same, to take that same fabric and make it look different. I don't want, my main point here is that you guys don't get bogged down by weird random rules that aren't real. Like, you don't need every single garment to be in a different fabric. That's not, no one does that in the fashion industry. That's like a weird, like, fake rule that I would think if I was just getting started, I would probably impose on myself, like, oh, well, now my whole line is so boring. It's all the same fabric. Especially true with swim. You know, if you're a shirting brand, obviously, if it's all like button-ups, you might want to do different fabrics. But you want to try to find these fabrics that even if in your one collection, you've got 6 styles and you've got 6 different fabrics, next season, or maybe the next, let's say we're working on spring, the next spring, maybe I reintroduce 3 of those fabrics in a different color. You want to do this for a couple reasons. So the tiered costing is one. And then it's also really helpful in your development process. You want to, like, you know, once you are in the industry for a while and your business is going, you want your development to go smooth. You don't want to, I mean, we have some designer kind of people we work with that every single garment is completely wildly different from the last. Every single thing has several fabrics all over it. There's never the same thing twice, right? There are certain brands that makes sense for, but it doesn't mean your brand is boring if you don't do that. You know, if you develop and your pattern maker is familiar with this poplin, and we know that it has a 2.5 by 2.5 shrinkage, you could even put the shrinkage in the pattern, and you could take the garment, make the garment, and then go get it washed, and then you take your shrinkage out. for example. And the more stuff that where you have like I use the same fabric for pocketing no matter what style I do. There's these 3 colors. I use the same fabric to line the waistband of my pants. I use this one poplin and I use this one denim. And then, you know, you bring in some specialty materials as needed, but this gives consistency to your brand. It allows for you to develop smarter and with less costs. And then you can kind of, it's like a grandfather thing where you inherit all the work you did before into your next collection to make it smoother sailing during development. So the other thing I want to talk about with leveraging fabrics is, you know, like I said earlier, if I know that I use this fabric on styles, I'm in my 3rd year, and, you know, I write the mill and I'm like, hey, I'm going to need about, you know, 600 yards. What's your stock position? And they say, well, we only have 900 yards left. And I say, shoot, well, I don't know. I mean, the other button up, I might need to make more of those. I haven't done my math yet. I'm going to buy all 900 because I know I have this fabric and I'm going to use it again and again and again. Even if that button up doesn't sell that well and I end up only, you know, either canceling it or only making 50 units instead of 150, I'm going to have that fabric and I got it at the good price and I'm going to have it on hand and I'm not going to worry about shortages and I can pivot and I can be quick and I can react. And if I have that fabric on hand and this style that I only allocated 25 pieces for in my e-com inventory, it sells out. Instead of it being a 12-week lead time because you have to order all the materials, you have the material on hand, you ask for your marker maker to reprint you something, and your factory cuts in and sews it in 6 weeks, and you still have a reorder in time during the season to sell that product again before it's too late. So huge advantage to leveraging fabrics for a variety of reasons. Other thing I want to mention is you can also dye a lot of fabrics. You can't really dye polyester and nylon that well. It's pretty hard. I wouldn't recommend it. I would just don't deal with it. But your modals, cottons, tencel, rayon, you can dye. So that's another way. I can sit on this in white and then I just can dye them up. And you can either dye it in panels or you can dye it in garment form. And when you dye it in garment form, you sew let's say I said this is a 2.5 by 2.5 shrinkage. You do your pattern as a 0 by 0 with no shrinkage in it. And then once your fit is finally approved, you send that pattern to your marker maker. They add 2.5% shrinkage on the length and width. The garment gets cut in the undyed fabric. It gets sewn with cotton thread. Then the full garment gets put into a dye vat and it shrinks down and it gets dyed up. So these are a variety of ways to work with stock fabrics, to work with everyday common fabrics and still trick it out to make it your brands and something that's identifiable for your company. I have totally overdone it with line here, so to more questions, and then I'm gonna say goodbye. Thank you for the compliment on my shirt. It's a traditional Filipino shirt, and I am Filipino. Okay, sorry, I don't know why it's doing this to me. Do you have the best places to buy heavyweight French terry? I've been having trouble finding some. Again, it's a faux pas to share our vendors. Nobody in the industry will do that for you. But Japanese fabrics tend to be beautiful and heavyweight, and you can find some stock service Japanese fabrics. Okay, let's see. Oh, that's all the questions here. I'm going to go look at the other one and see if there's any. Okay. Great. Okay, those are all the questions everybody had. It was really nice to be here again. I'm always so long-winded. I love sharing my knowledge and I love getting into the details. So thank you for staying with me. And for all those of you who sat through the awkward beginning when I was just sitting here waiting for more people to join, thank you so much. It's been really good to see you guys. Please make sure to check out Stateless. It's makersroad.com/stateless. Reach out to us. We would be happy to help you. Try to sign up for Embark Live. Check out our old lives that we've done they're all archived on Facebook. And I'm not sure when I'll be back next, but until then, thank you guys so much. Okay, bye.